Growing up in the shadow of my sister Sophia was like living with a constant eclipse. No matter what I did, her light always seemed to outshine mine. She was the talented one, the beautiful one, the one everyone noticed. I was just Natalia, the forgotten daughter. I still remember my 16th birthday. I had spent weeks practicing a piano piece for the small gathering at our house. When the moment came, I played with all my heart, fingers gliding across the keys as I poured my soul into every note. As the final chord faded, I looked up expectantly at my parents, hoping for some acknowledgement, some small sign that they had seen me. But their eyes were already on Sophia, who had started performing an impromptu dance in the corner of the room. "Look at our little ballerina," Mom exclaimed, clapping enthusiastically. Dad joined in, his eyes crinkling with pride. "She's a natural." The cake I had waited all day to blow out candles on sat forgotten on the table, just like me. That night, I cried silently in my room, clutching the small trophy I'd won at the regional piano competition last month, the one nobody had come to see me receive. College was my escape. For the first time, I could breathe without feeling Sophia's presence overwhelming every corner of my life. I chose a university 3 states away, far enough that weekend visits weren't expected. I studied literature and photography, finding solace in books and behind the lens of my camera. I captured moments of quiet beauty, the way light filtered through autumn leaves, the gentle smile of an elderly woman feeding pigeons, the reflections in puddles after rain. And then there was Alex. We met in a coffee shop just off campus, where I was photographing the intricate latte art the barista created. He bumped into my table, nearly spilling my coffee, and spent the next hour apologizing by telling me terrible jokes that somehow made me laugh until my sides hurt. He wasn't perfect though was forgetful, and sometimes got too caught up in his engineering projects, forgetting our dinner plans. But he looked at me, really looked at me, in a way no one else ever had. When I showed him my photographs, he didn't just glance and nod. He studied them, asked questions about my technique, my inspiration. He made me feel like I mattered. "You see the world differently, Natalia," he told me one evening as we walked along the river, the setting sun painting everything in hues of gold and amber. "You find beauty in places most people don't even notice." For the first time in my life, I felt seen. When spring break came around, I decided to bring Alex home. Maybe, I thought foolishly, if my parents saw that someone valued me, they might start to see me too. The house looked exactly as I had left it. My mother's prized roses lining the walkway, the familiar scent of cinnamon and vanilla greeting us as we stepped through the door. Sophia was home too, having taken a semester off from her stressful modeling career to find herself. She descended the stairs like a queen making an entrance, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, her smile dazzling. I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach, that mixture of admiration and dread I'd known all my life. "Natalia, you're finally home," she exclaimed, enveloping me in a cloud of expensive perfume. And then her eyes landed on Alex, and I saw it, that familiar predatory glint, the one that said she had found something new to take. Dinner was excruciating. Sophia dominated the conversation, as usual, regaling us with stories of photo shoots in exotic locations and famous people she'd met. My parents hung on her every word, their faces glowing with pride. Alex sat beside me, his knee occasionally pressing against mine under the table, a silent reminder of his presence. But then I noticed it, the way his laugh came a little too quickly at Sophia's jokes, the way his eyes lingered on her a moment too long. My stomach clenched. Later, in the kitchen, I confronted her. "Sophia, what are you doing? Alex is my boyfriend." She looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I'm just being friendly." She flipped her perfect hair, the gesture so practiced it looked like she was in a shampoo commercial. "Don't be so insecure, Natalia. It's not a good look on you." "Mom," I said, turning to where she was arranging dessert plates, "Sophia's flirting with Alex. Don't you see it?" My mother sighed, not even looking up. "Natalia, don't start drama. Sophia's just being her charming self. You always were the sensitive one." Alex broke up with me 2 weeks after we returned to campus. It was a beautiful spring day, mockingly bright and cheerful, birds singing as if they were celebrating my heartbreak. "I'm sorry, Natalia," he said, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. I think we should see other people." "It's Sophia, isn't it?" My voice was barely a whisper, but I already knew the answer. He flinched, guilt flashing across his face. We connected. I didn't mean for it to happen. I stood there, numb, as he walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. That night, I sat on my dorm room floor, surrounded by the photographs I'd taken of him, Alex laughing by the lake, Alex concentrating on a book, Alex looking at me with what I had thought was love. With shaking hands, I tore them all to pieces. 3 days later, I saw them together on Sophia's Instagram, her perfectly manicured hand resting on his chest, her caption reading, "Sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places, Kamine." My mother had liked the post and commented, "You two look perfect together." Something in me snapped. I packed my bags that night, dropped out of my classes, and moved to New York City with nothing but my camera and a determination that burned hotter than any pain. I blocked their numbers, deleted my social media accounts, and disappeared. New York was harder than I had expected. I found a tiny apartment with 2 roommates in Brooklyn, the kind of place where you could hear everything through the paper-thin walls. I took a job at a coffee shop, serving the same latte art I once photographed, and spent my evenings wandering the city with my camera, capturing its raw, unfiltered beauty. Slowly, painfully, I rebuilt myself. I started a photography blog, posting my images of the city's forgotten corners, the elderly couple dancing in their apartment window, visible from the subway platform, the community garden blooming between abandoned buildings, the street artist whose chalk masterpieces were washed away by rain each night. To my surprise, people responded. My followers grew, slowly at first, then faster. A small gallery in Chelsea displayed some of my work. Then, a larger one. A magazine wanted to feature my photographs. A publishing house approached me about a book. And there was Michael. He came to one of my exhibitions, stood in front of a photograph of an old man playing chess alone in the park for nearly an hour. When I approached him, curious about his intense focus, he turned to me with eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "You understand loneliness," he said simply. "Not many people do." We talked until the gallery closed, then continued at a small cafe nearby, words pouring out like we'd been saving them for each other all our lives. He told me about building his tech company from nothing, about losing his parents young, about feeling like an imposter in the world of success he'd created. "I have everything people think they want," he confessed, "and some days I still feel like that orphaned kid with nothing." I understood. For the first time, I truly understood someone and was understood in return. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We were both too damaged for that. We fought sometimes about small things that masked bigger fears. I worried he would find someone more worthy of his world. He worried I would see him only for his success. But we talked, really talked, in a way I never had with anyone before. "I see you, Natalia," he would tell me in our quieter moments. "All of you, the light and the shadow, and I love every part." Years passed. My photography career flourished. Michael's company expanded globally. We moved into a penthouse in Manhattan with windows that looked out over the city I had come to love. I created a studio where I could work, surrounded by prints of my favorite photographs. And then my mother called. I almost didn't recognize her voice. It had been 5 years since I'd heard it. "Natalia," she said, her words cracking. "It's your father. He's gone. Heart attack. The funeral is next weekend." I sat in my studio after hanging up, staring at my camera, at the life I had built from the ashes of the one I had left behind. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, to pretend I hadn't heard, to continue my self-imposed exile. But another part, a part I thought had died long ago, ached to go, to say goodbye, to face the ghosts I had been running from. "Should I go?" I asked Michael that night, curled against him on our terrace, the city lights twinkling below us like earthbound stars. He held me tighter, his voice soft but certain. "Not for them, for you, for closure." The drive back to my hometown felt surreal, like traveling back in time. Michael sat beside me, a steady presence as familiar landmarks appeared: the old movie theater, the ice cream shop where I had my first job, the park where I used to read to escape my house. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, memories flooding back with each passing mile. The funeral home was filled with people I barely recognized, faces from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. My mother sat in the front row, her face drawn with grief but still somehow poised, as if she were performing sorrow for an audience. And beside her, Sophia, her golden hair pulled back, her eyes red-rimmed but her posture perfect, Alex at her side, looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed too tight. When I entered, a hush fell over the room. I felt their eyes on me. The prodigal daughter returned, but I kept my gaze forward, Michael's hand firm in mine. "Natalia," my mother whispered, rising halfway from her seat, her voice a mixture of relief and apprehension. Sophia's eyes widened as she took in Michael, recognition dawning on her face. Everyone knew who he washes face had been on the cover of every business magazine, his success story taught in universities across the country. I saw the moment she understood, the calculating look, the quick assessment of his tailored suit, his quiet confidence, the way he stood protectively close to me. I saw her glance at Alex, whose career had stalled, whose promise had never quite materialized, and I saw the regret flash across her face. For a moment, I felt a surge of vindication, of bitter satisfaction. But then I looked at my father's casket, at the man who had never truly seen me, and I realized this wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about the woman I had become despite them, not because of them. I approached the front row, my steps steady. "Hello, Mom," I said, my voice clear in the hushed room. "I'm sorry about Dad." She reached for me, her hands trembling. "Natalia, you came. I've been calling for years." "I know," I cut her off gently. "I wasn't ready." Sophia stood then, her perfect composure cracking. "Nat, she glanced at Alex, who was staring at his shoes. "I should have." "It's okay," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "It was a long time ago." Because it was. Standing there, I realized the wounds had scarred over. They still marked me, but they no longer defined me. I had built a life, a career, a love that was entirely my own. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't even want it. The service was quiet, dignified. I sat with Michael, away from my mother and Sophia. I listened to people speak about a man I had never really known, a father who had been present physically but absent in all the ways that mattered. I didn't cry, not because I felt nothing, but because my grief was for what could have been, not for what was. Afterward, at the reception, my mother cornered me, her eyes pleading. "Please, Natalia, come home. Let's talk. I've missed you so much." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw for the first time how small she seemed, how fragile. The woman who had loomed so large in my childhood fears now appeared broken, diminished by grief and regret. "I have a home," I said gently, "but we can talk. Not today, but soon." Sophia approached tentatively, Alex trailing behind her like a shadow. Her once perfect appearance showed signs of strained fine lines around her eyes, a tightness to her smile that hadn't been there before. "You're famous now," she said, trying for her old confidence but falling short. "I've seen your work in magazines. It's beautiful." "Thank you," I replied, watching her eyes dart to Michael, then back to me. "And you're—" She gestured vaguely at Michael, words failing her for perhaps the first time in her life. "Happy," I finished for her. "I'm happy, Sophia." Something crumpled in her expression then, a mixture of envy and realization. I wondered if she was thinking about the path she had chosen, about the hollow victory of stealing a man who had never really been the prize she thought he was. Alex couldn't meet my eyes, his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "Congratulations on your success," he mumbled. Michael, who had been silent beside me, finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. "Natalia's success is entirely her own. She's the most talented, determined person I've ever met." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a pride that had nothing to do with my relation to him, and everything to do with who I was. "I'm the lucky one." I felt it then, a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly brought me to tears. Not for revenge or vindication, but for the journey that had brought me here, to this moment, to this understanding of my own worth. We left shortly after, the weight of the past lightened but not forgotten. As we drove away, Michael took my hand across the console, his touch grounding me in the present. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I looked out at the town growing smaller in the rearview mirror, at the life I had left behind, and felt a sense of peace settle over me. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how true it was. "I really am." Back in New York, I threw myself into my work with renewed energy. My next exhibition was my most personal yet photographs that traced my journey from invisibility to recognition, from shadow to light. I called it Becoming Visible, and dedicated it to everyone who had ever felt unseen. On opening night, I stood in the gallery surrounded by my work, by the friends and colleagues who had become my chosen family. Michael was there, his quiet pride a balm to my soul. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother saying she wished she could be there, that she was trying to understand the daughter she had never really known. I put the phone away, not ready to respond yet, but not closing the door either. Healing would take time, would require work from both of us. I wasn't sure if it was possible, but for the first time, I was willing to find out. As I moved through the crowd, explaining my photographs, accepting congratulations, I caught a glimpse of myself reflected in one of the gallery windows, a woman strong, confident, at peace with herself. Not perfect, not unscathed, but whole. I thought about the girl I had been, always seeking validation, always living in Sophia's shadow. I thought about the woman I had become, creating my own light. The journey between those two versions of myself had been painful, filled with loss and struggle, but I wouldn't change it. Every step had led me here, to this moment, to this understanding. I was enough. I had always been enough. And now, finally, I knew it. Michael found me later, as the crowd was thinning, standing before a photograph I had taken years ago, a small bird perched on a branch after a storm, its feathers ruffled but intact, the sun breaking through clouds behind it. "This one's my favorite," he said, slipping his arm around my waist. I leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. Mine too. Because sometimes survival is its own kind of beauty. Sometimes the light means more when you've known the darkness. And sometimes the most important person to become visible to is yourself.